My name's Adele Onyango and welcome to another episode of Legally Clueless. No, seriously, I have no clue what I'm doing, but I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Hey you, welcome to episode 267 of Legally Clueless, and here's what's coming up in this episode.
And so now when I look back, I'm like, it was a bit unfair-ish of my mom to have taken me to their house, yet they're not in the best of spaces to take care of me. So at some point nikafukuzwa kwa nyumba and I got stranded. I remember I was out on the streets for a couple of days, and for the first time I actually walked into a restaurant to ask for food, to borrow food. And all this is not making sense because I'm like, my mom is somewhere living the life.
If you are an OG member of this family, thank you so much for rocking with this podcast and with our entire family. And if you're new to this, audio episodes like this go out every single Monday, and you can stream us everywhere you find podcasts on. You can also head over to legallycluelessafrica.com to sign up to officially join the family, to watch our video series. We have 4 seasons out, and to watch our tour series. Speaking of, our East Africa tour series is going to be out in a couple of weeks. Ooh, I can't say anything more, but all you need to do is head over to our website, sign up to officially join the family so that you can receive letters from me that always give any Legally Clueless 411 first. All right, so before we get to part 2 of Susan Grace's story, I had 2 things I wanted to share with you. The first one is something that, at least in my experience, I'm finding comes with healing. You know, I find that you evolve into a different version of you, and different not internally, because my experience with healing is that I've just come back to myself. So I mean different in terms of who people around you know you to be. Sometimes healing means expanding past some relationships. So there are some relationships that will end because of this different version of you. You may find yourself having to make new friends, make new relationships, build a new community, which is what's happening with me. And it's pretty scary. But I've started that process and it's been very awesome, I have to say. So this weekend, I was invited by someone I know to join him and his friends at his house for a night of just karaoke, and it was splendid. I mean, I was with a bunch of basic strangers because I knew only the host really and like one other person, and I had such a good time. These are not people I have met often. They're not people I talk to often, complete strangers, but it was so good. It was so good. The previous versions of me would never have done that. Would never ever have done that. But I'm also being very proactive in reaching out to people I think I want to grow a friendship with, especially women, you know? So I've had some lunch meetups that have been very great, and just kind of like not waiting for the friends to pop up in my life, because also I tend not to leave my house very often. So unless they're full-on stalker who will find their way to the middle of nowhere where I live to ring my bell, I have to be proactive. So I just wanted to share that because I think quite a few of us, especially if you are actively healing, this is a part of it that you may be experiencing. And it's scary as fuck, but like once you start putting yourself out there, honestly, I'm finding it to be an adventure, and it's like yielding nice results, and it's fun. Honestly, it's very fun. So I just wanted to toast to us who are out here shooting our shots friendship-wise. The second thing I wanted to share, which is much longer, is on mother wounds, because it comes up in Susan Grace's story. And it's also one of the topics in our group therapy sessions that are resuming in June 2024. And it's going to be a 4-part group therapy session. The details will be out very soon. But in the meantime, I did do some reading up on mother wounds, and I found a medically approved deep dive that I wanted to kind of like share some bits that I got from it with you. I didn't want to rely on opinion pieces, because when it comes to our mind, we have to be very careful. That's my approach when I'm like researching on anything wellness related, you know? And so first I remember thinking, okay, I throw the term father wound around because that's what I've experienced in my life. or like what I'm navigating. But I was like, okay, mother wound, what is that to begin with? Like, what is the definition? And what I found was that if we come from a foundation of mothers having molding us and like really being instrumental in our being, both physically because they birthed us, well, if it's like a physical birth, obviously there are various other ways people can be moms. But speaking specifically about that, there's a physical aspect, but also there's the emotional aspect, right? So how they interact with us and the conversations they have with us. And sometimes that doesn't exist. The emotional just doesn't exist. And so what researchers call a mother wound is when there's an absence of that emotional connection or interaction between a mother and child. So you can then develop a mother wound when you, yes, still get your physical needs met by your mother, but there was no emotional side, so there was no love and there was no emotional connection or bond. It also sometimes comes about when you as a child are expected to meet your own physical and emotional needs, or when you're not allowed to express negative emotions. I talked about mother wounds on my Instagram page, and one person said the reason for their strained relationship with their mom was whenever they give their mom negative feedback, even just like no, if they say no to their mom will guilt them into doing what she wants them to do. This article also said if the mother doesn't provide empathy to mirror the child's emotions and help them identify the emotions and then like process them, you could, if that happens often, you could end up having a mother wound, which also came up when I spoke about this on Instagram, because a lot of people who had strained relationships with their mom felt like their emotions, whenever they shared them, were not met with empathy, but were like dismissed. Another thing that I think happens a lot in African households when you look at like African mom and child relationships is when your mom is like extra critical about you, about what you do, about your grades, about everything about you. It can develop into a mother wound. Another one, which I think actually came out in Susan Grace's story, well, part 1, we're about to jump into part 2, was if your mom also suffered like emotional or physical abuse themselves. It could be with their mother or in a different scenario and they hadn't processed the trauma. It's kind of like that saying that says hurting people hurt people. So they just continue that cycle. And then there's also the elements of like if there was alcoholism or some sort of drug addiction or untreated mental health condition, if that's kind of the environment you grew up in, it could develop into a mother wound. And we're going to make sure the link to this article is in the show notes. There's a point where they list things that could help you figure out if you have a mother wound. So it's like if maybe you feel like you can't turn to your mom for any form of support or security, if you're reluctant to do that. If maybe you doubted that you had your mom's approval, so you were always trying to be perfect. If you felt nervous and frightened around your mom. If your mom expected you or expects you to take care of her physically or emotionally. I know this particular point came up when I was doing therapy some time back. And so my therapist was explaining to me how sometimes moms make their children their confidants and they will be sharing things that they really shouldn't be sharing with a child, or kind of like emotionally dumping on their child and expecting the child to take care of their emotional needs. Yeah, absolutely not healthy. But I really do recommend that you read that article. I found it quite illuminating when it comes to mother wounds. And the reason I wanted to read it is that's not the wound that I'm navigating. So I wanted to understand it more, especially because it's coming up in the story quite loudly. You know what I mean? So yeah, the article is linked in the show notes. And I like that it also speaks about healing mother wounds. So you can start to get some insights on that. Please remember this article is not the gospel. So just take it as a resource, but tap into other healing options as well. Therapy has always worked for me, so I'm always championing that, but I know that's not the only option and sometimes it doesn't work for everybody. But yeah, just take the article as a resource, not gospel and like diagnose yourself. No, just Read to be informed. On that note, I think we should jump into part 2 of Susan Grace's story. And part 1 ended with her having moved back with her mom, and her mom comes home after disappearing for a while and announces that, hey, we're gonna move. 100 African stories on Legally Clueless. Stories from Africa.
I think she put me in the custody of another relative at the time. And let me tell you, I think my whole life, well, a big chunk of my life has just been, it's like I'm from one person to another, because it started with my grandmother. I came to stay with her. She had me stay with an auntie. After that, she took me to boarding school. And so I just felt like she was just constantly trying to, quote unquote, get rid of me, And as you can imagine, that strained our friendship, our relationship rather. So anyway, I moved in with a relative. At the time, I had changed schools because I remember this boyfriend of hers, because he cared, or so I thought. I think he'd asked me one of the things that I want. And I told him, because at the time I was in an 844 school, and I told him, man, to be honest, I don't like 844. I want to move to a school with a British system. And I was too scared to ask my mom, because I don't want to ask my mom for anything, because even when my period started, I don't think I was confident enough to talk to my mom about it, because again, I just feel like a burden. So when he asked me what I want, I told him one of the things. Of course, I wanted a phone. That's a time where, you remember the Ideos? That small phone was the big thing. But I told him, most importantly, I don't like my school. I don't like the 844 system. It's a bit overwhelming for me. And then keep in mind, I'm also struggling with my own issues. And so I told him I would prefer to move to a school with the IGCSE system. And interestingly enough, my mom was actually willing, but I feel like maybe he pressured her to do it. I don't know. I don't know what they would discuss. But the important thing is, for me, I changed schools. So at this point, I went to stay with a relative, and it was okay, but there's just that feeling of your mom's just trying to get rid of you, And at some point, I was kicked out of that house at night, 8 p.m. It may not have been 8 on the dot, but I know it was 8 something. So the relative I was staying with, I guess at some point she didn't like me. Or, again, like I said, when you grow up, you start to piece things together. I think she didn't like my mom, once again, but I'm the one who was there to take the fall, because my mom was very able and very capable of taking care of me. She had a very big house to herself. She was financially doing okay, but she was burdening people with the responsibility of having to take care of me. So my auntie at the time, they had a newborn. I guess we were still trying to figure things out together. They were staying in an apartment. And so now when I look back, I'm like, it was a bit unfair-ish of my mom to have taken me to their house, yet they're not in the best of spaces to take care of me. So at some point, nikafukuzwa kwa nyumba, and I got stranded. I remember I was out on the streets for a couple of days, and for the first time, I actually walked into a restaurant to ask for food, to borrow food. And all this is not making sense, because I'm like, my mom is somewhere living their life. When I got kicked out, so let me give you a backstory. So it was agreed upon that this relative didn't want me to stay with her anymore. And she asked me, where are you going to go? Because you got to go somewhere. And I'm like, it kind of feels like my mom doesn't want me. I don't want to go back to my grandmother's, because I don't think I have the grace I don't have the strength for that again, And so I had to choose. And honestly, funny enough, I chose my grandmother, because I'm like, you know what? Yeah. Let me just go back to where it all started, because now going back to my mom, I already feel like I'm forcing myself on my mom, So we said we are going. So my uncle said he was going to take me to now town to take matatu to get to my grandmother's, basically. And so that day when I was supposed to go, I left the house a bit late. So when I called my uncle to tell him I'm on my way, he told me, I'm actually rushing to a meeting. Let's do this. You just go back home. And then when I'm leaving tomorrow, we can leave together. And I said, cool. And then on my way back, I got robbed. So my jacket was stolen, my phone was stolen, my money was stolen. I didn't have anything on me. And so because I have no money, I had to walk. This was in Ngong. And when I tell you I walked for like how many hours? I walked for hours and hours. So by the time I was getting home, it was now that time around 8 p.m. So of course my aunt is angry. She's like, oh, you've even decided to switch off your phone on us. I'm like, I got robbed. You see me? And then I had a spaghetti top. So the cold was just hitting me direct. So I'm telling her, me, first of all, I was robbed. I've had to walk from this point to this point. I've just been taking breaks in between because it's a long distance, And she just told me she doesn't care. And she told me, you're not coming into my house. And I'm like, but where am I going, Now in Ngong, I don't think I had a social life. So I didn't know who stayed where. I didn't have tight bonds with people around. It's just somebody from church, somebody from maybe a shop that you'll meet. But I didn't have tight bonds back then. So when she's telling me you're not sleeping here, I'm like, where am I gonna go? So anyway, I told her I need a jacket. She told me she was gonna give me a jacket. She brought me a jacket. I remember I went and sat on the stairs and I cried because I'm like, what do people do once they've been kicked out of the house? So I got downstairs. There's a barber shop that was just around the corner. And, I'm a very social person. And I appreciate the fact that I'm a social person because it comes in handy for me. I always say hi to people, just how are you doing? How's biashara? How's business? And so I went to this guy and we had created some rapport because, just the socializing. And I told him I need to. Can I borrow your phone? And I called my mom and I'm crying. I'm scared. I tell my mom, I've been kicked out. And she instantly goes, what did you do? I'm like, so I tried to give her the story of, how I got robbed and then I had to walk from this point to this point and then I got home late. And she goes like, oh, I've even been getting a lot of complaints about you, complaints of you spending too much time in the shower, so the tokens, what, or you're doing this, you're doing that, you're not doing this. It was just, and I'm like, I don't even think this is the time for this. And I also feel like you've been hearing things behind my back, but you're not checking in with me because there's also my side of the story, But anyway, it doesn't matter because even when I came and told you my side of the story regarding your boyfriend, you didn't take it seriously. Well, I didn't say this. It's just in my head. And so I told her, what do you mean? And she's like, I've just been hearing complaints about you. And I'm telling her, okay, mom, right now, I'm outside. I don't know where to go. I don't have friends in this place. This phone I've borrowed from the Kinyuzi guy. The Kinyuzi is the barber shop. And she just starts to yell at me. And I remember at some point I just blocked it out. Because I'm thinking, I am scared to death. What if I get murdered out here? What if I get kidnapped? What if something happens to me out on the streets? And she's just yelling at me. And I'm thinking, you know what? I told her, Mom, I'm sorry for calling. I'm sorry for disturbing. I just wanted you to know that I'm just out here on the streets should anything happen. And I hanged up. I gave back the phone and I told the guy, if this number calls, don't answer. And he's like, why not? I'm like, she's probably going to ask you where I am and you won't have an answer because even I don't know where I'm going. Nilizunguka yo town, Ngong usiku. I even got to a point where I went to the restaurant again. It's a good thing to always say hi to people. There's this guy who I would say hi to. He was just, I knew him from that town. I didn't know he would manage. He was a manager in the restaurant. So I went and I found him there and I asked if they had food that they were planning to throw away and if they can just, serve me a little bit. And it just felt weird having to beg for food. It's just unbelievable. These are not things that you imagine would happen to you. And then I asked him if he knew somebody from the cyber. There was a cyber next. I'm like, might you know somebody from this cyber that just talk to him and just tell him to allow me to browse for 10 minutes because I wanted to get on my Facebook and see people that I know, people that I talk to a lot, try to see if they can help me because now I'm stranded. And unfortunately, the cyber was closing. I'm like, okay, no pressure. So this guy tells me, we can go with you to my place and then maybe tomorrow morning you'll have figured things out. And I'm thinking, man is about to take advantage of me because now he knows I have nowhere to go, But then again, I'm like, this is not the worst thing that could happen, right? I mean, my mom's boyfriend already took advantage. My mom doesn't even care about me. If this guy wants to rape me, I don't think it's the worst that could happen so far. So as long as he's giving me a roof for that night, I'm cool. And we went to his place and I remember it was a bed-sitter where everything is in one room, right? That's a bed-sitter. So the couch is here, the bed is over there, and he allowed me to sleep on the bed. He took the couch. But now the whole night, I couldn't sleep because I'm crying. I'm feeling so bad. So the whole time, I'm just like... So he's like, okay, do you need me to come and comfort you? I'm like, oh, no, I'm good, And eventually, he was just like, listen, it's not like I'm going to do anything. I just want to make sure that you're okay. And I think he held me the entire night. He didn't do anything. Thank God. So the next morning, I wake up. He gives me 500 shillings. And he tells me, this is just for anything you might need while you're figuring things out. And I was like, wow, thank you. And then he showed me to the shower. I took a shower, but went back to the same clothes. And the worst thing that happened to me when I was out on the streets, perambulating, was that my period started. Now your periods have started. You're on the streets. You don't know where to go. You don't know people here. I'm feeling a bit embarrassed to go back to the same guy and say, you give me your house keys, I go take a shower. It's just, I don't know, it just didn't feel right. Let me tell you, I don't know, those few days on the streets were just horrible. So anyway, luckily I went to now another place where I knew people. It was like a couple center where guys would go play pool. I knew one guy who's called Mike. I went looking for Mike. Unfortunately, Mike was not there. So I'm like, it's okay, I'm going to wait for him here. And so I sat there waiting for somebody whom I didn't know would show up. Eventually he did, and I told him, I just need your help. I had to give him like a background story. I told him, I just need a place to take a shower. Right now I feel so dirty. So with the 500 bob, I bought sanitary towels, and I also got some underwear. So I just needed somebody to give me somewhere to take a shower. So he told me, I'd like to take you home, but I can't because my dad is around. And the dad was like a cop, like some big shot in the police force. So I'm like, I don't want to be interrogated and all this. So we figured out a way. So he called his brother to call his girlfriend to come through for me. And she did. And I remember she took me to her place. I took a shower. She gave me clothes to wear. I actually remember for a very long time, I kept those clothes as much as they were not fitting. But I was just like, they just reminded me of a time where I was at my worst and somebody came through for me, even when I was a stranger to them. So this friend of mine, funny enough, this girlfriend of the guy's brother, she took me to her place, showered, fed me, nini. But now eventually she told me, my mom is also a cop. So if she finds you here, she'll ask you questions. Is it something that you want the police to handle? I'm like, I've forced issues with my mom so much. I can't force her to love me through, the authority. So I'm like, no, I'll just find somewhere to go. She's like, so do you know where you will go? And I told her, Kitambo, we stayed in Embakasi, the place where she came and she woke me up. She's like, we're moving out. So in Embakasi, in that estate where we lived, I know of this lady who was very close to my mom. And she was like a mother figure to her. So I could go check if she still lives there and I could talk to her. She's like, sawa. So she took me to town. Okay, this lady was too nice. She took me to town. I got me to the matatus that go to Embakasi. Told the driver, make sure she alights at this point. Told the tout, make sure she alights at this point. Told the passengers, make sure this girl alights at this point. Because I was not very familiar with, the city. So I got there, it was in the afternoon, I think. But when I got there, I was scared to go to her directly. So at this point, the first person I think of going to for help is my mom's boyfriend, ex-boyfriend at this time. Because he lived in Embakasi as well. And I'm like, man, things are so bad. And I'm thinking, this man got what he wanted from me. At the very least, he should be able to give me what I want. That's how I was arguing. So I went to his place. He wasn't there. I think I camped. I camped at someone else. Let me tell you this, Nairobi, we have suffered. I first camped at a friend's place. And by place, I mean like at the gate with the watches, with the security guards. So I had a friend whom I knew from Facebook, and his number was so easy to cram. So when I got a hold of a phone, I called him. He was called Ahmed. And I told him, I'm stranded. It's a long story. I can't exhaust everything on phone. Is it okay if I crash at your place today? And he said, yeah, cool, no worries. So he told me he was at work and he was coming later. So I waited for this man. So I told the security guards, I'm waiting for Ahmed. He's coming. I waited 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., and they're like, are you sure he's still coming? I'm like, yeah, he told me he's coming. And I don't know, I believe he's coming. 9 p.m. I think at like 10, I'm like, can I borrow your phone to call him again? So I call the guy, he's asleep. And he tells me, oh, I forgot to tell you, I decided to crash at a friend's place or just somewhere. He was not home and he was not coming home. And so I told the security guards, where he's elsewhere. And at this point, I felt like it was very late in the night. I don't know anyone else and I don't want to start walking around. So I asked them, is it okay if I just crash with you guys over here? And I remember they were very willing, but there was one guy who was overly insisting that we go in a little corner somewhere because he was like, here, you're not going to feel cold. It's more enclosed. I'm like, let me stay here where the mosquitoes are biting, Sat there, stories, but then I was getting sleepy. So, these trucks that bring bread in the morning and milk there's a truck that came that night because there's a supermarket there. I remember I just asked the driver, can I just crash in your car? And he said, sure. So I slept in the front seat of the lorry, and they woke me up very early in the morning because now he had to go. And man, I woke up feeling so horrible because I'm like, how am I this stranded? And my mom has a beautiful big house. It's just not making sense. But I'm like, anyway, it is what it is. So now that morning, that's when I went to my mom's boyfriend's place to see if he might be there. Probably, I don't know, I just had hopes. Again, since he took advantage of me, maybe he'll give you an opportunity to take advantage of him, but I didn't find him home. So now I had to go to our estate where I met that lady who was friends with my mom. And I spoke to her, I explained everything, and she told me, eventually you have to go back home because people might be worried. And I remember telling her, I don't think people care whether I got hit back. I really don't think people care. But anyway, long story short, I told her, again, I'm going to go back to my grandmother's. And I called my grandmother. She was actually excited to hear that I'm okay. Went with her. Luckily, the next day they were traveling to Malindi. So I got to hop on that trip, went to Malindi, had a good time. I think it all came back to now staying back with my mom. I was in boarding school at that point. And now that's what I was telling my mom. Started sort of overcompensating, feeling bad. I remember at some point she asked me, when you finish school, do you want to study uni here or abroad? And I said abroad. And she was like, cool. She didn't ask questions. I mean, when she was doing all these things that were good, I wouldn't say I'm a spoiled kid because the spoiling was making up for the damage, for the mental health. I don't even know what I'm going to call it. So her giving me everything that I wanted and asked for, it was good. But what I wanted from the very beginning, she didn't give me, But anyway, fast forward to when she passed away. This was in 2015. I felt bad because now I saw my mom. I saw her dying. It just started with her. She had a flu that escalated and things got bad in her lungs. And then she was coughing out a lot of blood. And I rushed her to hospital and she was telling me, Jerry, I don't even think I'll make it. And that's the last thing my mom told me. And for sure, she didn't make it. And so now her loss also just left me so puzzled. And I'm like, where does this leave me? The only parent I had is gone. And the thing that really pained me a lot, of course, it's her passing, but then also she went away with so many questions because I wanted to understand, is it that you hated me so much? Or was it that the concept of parenting was very foreign to you? Because, there are people, when you're a first-time parent, you're trying to figure things out. It's the same way when you're learning how to drive. You might hit a pole, you might just get off course. But I just wanted to ask her so many questions. When your boyfriend was doing the deed, why didn't you step in? Why did you step in when it was too late? When I told you I don't want to stay at my grandmother's, why did you ignore? When I got kicked out and I called you, you didn't come through for me. Like, is it that you hated me, or it's just that parenting was just too much for you? So I had so many questions, and I guess I'll never get closure for those things because she's gone and she went to the answers. And the best thing I can do for myself, and this is what I've been doing for myself, is not allowing the past to define who Susan Grace is. It's accepting that, yes, the past was a bit unpleasant, but there are beautiful stories that have been birthed out of it. There are beautiful testimonies that have come out of it. I hear people telling me, oh my God, you're such a strong person. I like to be strong, but I don't think I was strong by choice. And there are times I don't want to be strong, but I feel like my whole life I was just being equipped to be a strong girl. Just every instance is about me and my strength being put to test. But the most important thing, again, that I did for myself is just letting go of the past, letting go of the fact that my mom hurt me, letting go of the fact that all those people hurt me or disappointed me or they let me down, and just knowing that I may never get answers for that. And I like to say that sometimes not getting the closure that you want might be the closure that you need, because you might go chasing after closure and then you learn other things that will hurt you more, and you're like, I shouldn't have opened this Pandora box. But I am in a better space, even mentally speaking. I think my story has really drawn me closer to God, because you see, after my mom passed away, I felt like I don't think I can count on anyone. I have an amazing family. My aunties and uncles are amazing, but you see, there's always that fear of disappointment, that people disappoint you. People don't care that much about you. And so it just put me in a position where I have no choice but to rely on God. And God is all I have right now on this earth. And so that really got me closer to God. I pray every day. I pray a lot. I tell God, thank you. I never shy away from testifying. Even on my social media, I go on there and I share my testimonies because he has been very faithful. And I think I turned out okay. About my biological dad, I told you there's like a story there. So I recently turned 30. I turned 30 in February. So before I turned 30, I wanted to reach out to him because I saw him for the first time at my mom's funeral, by the way. He showed up at my mom's funeral. And I was like, okay, the timing just isn't great, And he was talking about how he wants us to get in touch, catch up. And I'm thinking, I went through so much hell because you were not in the picture. So I'm also very bitter about this man. And you're just showing up talking about casually catching up. I was like, no, Iwizi, it's not gonna happen. So I politely dismissed him. And I told him, we don't have to do this because mom is gone. The same way we've not been in each other's lives, let's just keep it that way, And he said for me a second time, and I went and I told him, I understand biologically you're my father, but I needed a dad growing up, And I told him, I don't think I'm interested in, starting a relationship or anything. And that was that. So before I turned 30, I was like, just in my healing journey, again, I've been doing a lot of letting go, a lot of forgiving. And let me tell you, the hardest part of the healing journey is forgiving people who never asked for your forgiveness and accepting apologies that were never given, So I made it a point to look for my dad, reach out to him, have a conversation, probably meet in person and just let him know that I'm not angry at him. I forgive him. I don't have bad blood towards him. So I tafuted. I finally got his number. I called him. We had a chat on phone and then we said we're going to meet in person. I wanted to meet him before I turned 30, but I guess he was preoccupied with other things. And I said, I think the important thing is I have reached out to him. He has my number and I know I can always call him anytime. If meeting in person proves to be difficult, then we can always have that conversation on phone, but I'd prefer if it was in person. And I guess after the first call, I felt not really relief, but I just felt, here goes another person whom I have sort of let go. I'm not holding them too dear to my heart. I'm not carrying them on my shoulders. So it felt nice. The other day I saw him calling me. I'm like, this is interesting, So we've not met just yet, but it's definitely something I'm looking forward to. And I was telling myself when I meet with him, I don't think I want to talk about him and my mom, because I also feel like my mom is not here to tell her side of the story. So it's like anything this man says could incriminate my mom, and I have no way of proving that it's inaccurate, So it's just to meet with him and just let him know that I'm cool, we're cool, no bad blood towards him. And also just to let him know, as much as, yes, I'm trying to pursue a connection, it's we're not pushing it. It's just most pole, a step at a time. No rush, yeah. But yeah, it was interesting talking to him for the first time on phone. Well, as we bring this episode to a conclusion, I just want to share nuggets of encouragement to somebody out there. First and foremost, I think it's more of, I know I'm not a parent, so I'm not certainly in the best of positions to be advising parents, but mine is just to encourage parents. If you have a daughter and she comes to you and she's telling you there's this man who's doing ABCD, please don't shrug a shoulder, because it now turns into something that cannot be undone. It causes a lot of damage. I don't know, just be the parent who listens to your children. And then the other thing is, now to anybody out there who's going through a tough time, I think mine is just to encourage you with two verses, my favorites. There's Exodus 14:14 that says, the Lord himself will fight for you. You just need to stay calm. And then the other verse is Philippians 1:6 that says, he who started a good work in you will definitely see it to completion after the day of Christ. Basically, God has started a good work in all of us, and he has promised to see it to conclusion and to completion up until the day of Christ. So basically, it's until we live and die and we see Christ, And then also, and this is always the thing I say, I guess in most interviews, is please don't allow your past to hold you hostage. Whatever happened. We can't change the past. It doesn't matter what we do. We can pray day in, day out, fast, but we can never change what happened in our past. So just to encourage somebody to just face the bull by its horns, accept what happened, go through the motions that come with the traumas and all the pain and all that, and then just dust yourself off and move forward. Don't allow your past to define you. Don't allow your past to hold you hostage.
Catch more African stories in the next episode of Legally Clueless. That was a really powerful story. And before I share my insights, I wanted to share some of your comments on part 1. Shout out to Karen, who said her strength to tell this means she has healed or is on her healing journey. Completely agree. Akumu, you say, I'm so grateful for grace. As someone who is looking into healing my mother wound, it is encouraging to hear other people's story and also see that they're still here with us. Kudos. FED, you just said relatable, and I hope the resource shared in this episode also helps you. Char, you said thank you for sharing this. Chi Creative, you said the ones that were supposed to protect her became her household enemies. I pray she finds strangers who would always give her the love she desires. And that's absolutely true. Sometimes it's absolute strangers who come into your life and like heal you. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you find more comfort and strength in like friends who have zero blood relation to you than actual family members. And yeah, I think you should be open to that. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I've experienced it in my life and I think it's a beautiful thing as well. What I felt, oh my God, this is just one of those stories that will always sit with me. I think the things that resonated with me were like closure, because I truly believe closure is not dependent on apologies and explanations or shifting what we think is wrong with the people who we feel have harmed us. Closure can be an individual walk. It can be you deciding you will take control over the healing with or without the apologies, with or without the acknowledgement, you know, and I think that's like level 10 of closure, and it's a powerful level to get to that. But sometimes if you wait for an apology or an explanation or an acknowledgement before you start healing how that hurt has affected you, you might be waiting for a long time, because you never know. The people who hurt us sometimes don't even realize they have hurt us. And so sometimes it's like, do I want to do the emotional work of trying to explain to you what you've done and like dig into why you did it, all because I'm trying to get to my apology? Sometimes I'm just like, nah, no thanks, man. I'm a heal with or without your apology, you know? Another thing that I feel came out for me when I was listening to this story is like there is a very high level of self-awareness that's needed for parenting. And I say this with like zero experience as a parent, but experience as a child who had an abusive dad and a very present mom. And as a child who lived with relatives, and like, I think, man, as a parent, there definitely, you are never 100% healed. You're never 100% ready to have a child. But I think there needs to be such a high awareness of self, awareness of the traumas you still need to work on, just so that the cycles that hurt you don't continue. Man, I really love children, and I just feel so deeply hurt when we make decisions that uphold harmful environments or harmful behavior or harmful cycles that we survived and we pass on to children. I think I always find it doesn't even anger me. It actually just breaks my heart. The last thing is, I genuinely think the strong woman rhetoric has been used to excuse a lot of things women endure that we shouldn't have to. Let's celebrate her strength instead of calling out the abusers and the irresponsible parents. And so I feel like it is right for women to get tired of being strong. Like, it has been used to keep us shackled and to keep the things that harm us and the people that harm us safe. So I don't even take it as a compliment when somebody tells me, oh, you're so strong. I'm like, nah, bro, remove these things that are requiring strength from me. You know what I mean? I completely resonated with that part of the story. But make sure you connect with Susan Grace. We have a link to her Instagram in the show notes. If you want to share your story on this podcast, all you have to do as well in the show notes is click the link to a storyteller form, fill it out, and we'll get back to you. You can also catch this podcast on Trace FM. We're there every Monday and Wednesday at 1 p.m. and 11 p.m. And on Fridays at 1 p.m. Just go over to traceradio.co.ke to I was going to say to screen, but I meant to stream. And the reason I say to screen is because our screening is still in preps. In case you don't know, we just came back from our East Africa tour. So we're getting ready to release that season, 13 episodes of Ugandan, Rwandan, and Ethiopian goodness. And we're going to have a screening, which means you get to watch a couple of episodes before everybody else. And we're in the prep stage. You can even hear the excitement in my voice. So Now is when to send your message to us on our Instagram page to let us know that you'd love to attend the screening, so that when we're sending out the invites, we make sure that your name is on the list and that you receive an invite. It's going to be a very small audience, and we've already gotten quite a few messages on Instagram. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's some that haven't received a response back yet, but you will soon. We're trying to keep up with that. But yeah, now is the time to get your bid in to get an invite, because we're going to have a very small guest list. And of course, I want you there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode to the very end. Make sure you share this podcast with all your friends, because I think we are an amazing community. And if you know people who need to join in, share the episodes with them and make sure they join in. Until next time, I am sending you tons of grace. That's it for this episode of Legally Clueless. You can share this podcast with your friends. You can keep it for yourself. I'm not judging. Just make sure you're here next week for the next episode.